Welcome to the Robertson Davies Library. My name is Andrea. I'm the librarian here, and it's an absolute honor to have you all here today. This evening is a celebration of many things. The great L.M. Montgomery, the power of writing, and of course, the book arts. It's a celebration to kick off the exhibition that will be on site for the next month. This exhibition was made possible through the dedication of Barbara Helander, the coordinator of this remarkable traveling exhibit. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to her for her care, passion, and effort that she has invested in curating this collection. The books you see here have been carefully prepared and organized to travel across Canada, from coast to coast. They've already been to PEI and back. Coordinating a national tour of this scale demands immense dedication, and Barb's commitment shines through in every detail. We are fortunate to have her here with us today, and she will also be speaking to you following the keynote address. She will be talking to you a little bit about CABBAGE, which is an acronym, not a vegetable, which stands for Canadian Bookbinders and Book Artists Guild. CABBAGE artists created the works behind you, and some of those artists are present here today. Two of them will be speaking to you about their creations, Emily Loker and Don Taylor. Don repairs all of our damaged books in our rare book collection on a weekly basis, which leads me to the great honor I have right now to introduce to you today's keynote speaker, Melanie J. Fishbane. Fishbane is a PhD candidate in the English and Writing Studies department at Western University. She teaches children's literature at George Brown College. She holds an MFA from the Vermont College of Fine Arts and an MA from Concordia University. She writes on gender, romance, and Jewish girlhood in children's and young adult literature. Her most recent articles are More Like Americans, Sidney Taylor's Queering of Historical Fiction Girls series, and an essay co-written with Dr. Carolyn Jones, Discovering Grace, Research Challenges in Finding the Lost Ingalls Sister. Her work is published in L.M. Montgomery's Rainbow Valleys, The Ontario Years, 1911 to 1942, and Reconsidering Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House, and Beyond. Her essay, Two Annes, Many Annes, a writer's reflection on reading Anne of Green Gables and The Diary of a Young Girl, was published in the Journal of L.M. Montgomery Studies and is included in the print edition of L.M. Montgomery and Reading. Her YA novel, Maud, a novel inspired by the life of L.M. Montgomery, was shortlisted for the Vine Awards for the Best in Canadian Jewish Literature. Melanie lives in Toronto with her partner and their fur babies, Merlin Cat and Angel Dog. You can follow Melanie on Instagram, Facebook, and read more about her and her work on her website. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Melanie.
So I want to thank you all for coming out tonight for this launch of the Kindred Spirits exhibition at Massey College's library. I'm grateful to the organizer, Andrea, who, like the intrepid librarian she is, she didn't let a broken link on my website stop her from tracking me down on Instagram and then inviting me to take part in this keynote to talk about L.M. Montgomery's creative legacy. I want to thank you to Professor Claire Battershill from the Faculty of Information who's sponsoring me today. Thanks to the Canadian Bookbinders and Book Artists Guild and the Kindred Spaces organizers for holding this event. And to my favorite indie bookseller, I don't even know if he's here yet, but Ben McNally, for agreeing to sell copies of my book, Maud. I look forward to hearing how Emily, Don, and Barbara discuss your own processes today. I'm really excited about this. In 1917, L.M. Montgomery wrote an essay called My Favorite Bookshelf. She writes, "These books are my friends. The books in other bookcases are merely agreeable acquaintances. Here is a book for my every mood, and the white magic of it never fails. A motley crew, verily yes." There is no class distinction in my pet bookshelf. If a book has the subtle, intimate, indefinable appeal to me, which a book friend must have, I care not whether it comes from rags, tags, or velvet gowns, whether the authors be known or unknown, new or old. It is kin to me, and I gladly hail the relationship. Because she was a voracious and diverse reader, Montgomery's work is infused in literary references. Writings from Alfred Lloyd Tennyson, Shakespeare, Louisa May Alcott, Jane Austen, and Charlotte Bronte, and many more. According to Emily Wooster, Anne of Green Gables contains direct and indirect references to 55 novels, fairy tales, poems, essays, recitation pieces, songs, operas, plays, and periodicals, 18 references to the Bible, the Catechism, and the Book of Common Prayer. 26 of the allusions in the novel refer to poems of all kind: Scott, Lowell, Longfellow, Tennyson, Browning, Whittier, and Hemans. Even the last line of Anne of Green Gables, "God's in his heavens, all's rights with the world," is taken from a Robert Browning poem. So Montgomery's work is a creative conversation with those writers who were kin to her. Her library contains fiction, poetry, psychology, history, and many other diverse subjects. Growing up in Cavendish, Prince Edward Island, with her grandparents, however, Montgomery did not have access to literature. She was limited to what was on her grandparents' bookshelf or in the school library. There was, of course, the Pilgrim's Progress, which she was allowed to read on Sundays, and the Bible. So with no mentors to guide her, Montgomery's literary apprenticeship and professionalization were embedded in her creative conversations with these authors and their work. Montgomery scholars like Mary Rubio and Elizabeth Watterson discuss how Montgomery was influenced by a range of English, Scottish, and U.S. writers, as well as some of the newer Canadian poets found in the Royal Readers at school. One of her first published essays in 1891, A Western Eden, in which Montgomery describes her impressions of Saskatchewan, Montgomery incorporates the work of Scottish-Canadian poet Alexander MacLachlan and Scottish journalist Charles Mackay's poem, To the West, to the West, to the Land of the Free. Montgomery played with these works. They were, as she says, her book friends. Montgomery also glued images of characters into her author's works and made notations in the margins. Wooster discusses how Montgomery used books for introspection and self-construction. She states, many volumes contain markings, underlines, punctuation marks, and arrows, annotations and commentary, pasted in clippings that relate to the authors and subjects of the book, various cards and notes from friends, and other ephemera. A few books were so stuffed with clippings that their bindings have broken, and still others reveal repeated readings and reflections in their marginalia. So, when we start to delve into the many writers, artists, playwrights, scholars, actors, collectors, musicians, readers inspired by Montgomery's texts, if we delve into the many volunteer and professional organizations that have evolved to preserve and promote the author's legacy, we see how Montgomery's writings span across communities, places, cultures, and across time. Because when artists and writers interact with Montgomery's work, they are also discovering a literary, historical, and cultural legacy that the author herself engaged in. As I will explore in this discussion, when I was writing my young adult novel, Maud, which in my mind is the portrait of the artist as a young woman, I researched Canada's history, specifically Atlantic history, Western Canadian history in the late 19th century, and the Nehiyawak, or Cree Nation peoples of northern Saskatchewan. I also researched Montgomery's literary influences, even trying to read The Pilgrim's Progress and Undine, and that was hard. I listened to Atlantic folk music and read Scott and Tennyson. I embraced as much of Montgomery's literary and cultural influences as I could to understand the character I was creating. Indeed, One of the biggest questions for me while writing Maud was how to distinguish between the historical person and the fictional character I was crafting. Many readers will tell you, and believe me, they told me that they had particular ideas about how Montgomery is simply by reading her books. There is often a confusion between Montgomery the person and Anne Shirley, the fictional character she created. For example, Mary Toussaint describes how Anne of Green Gables is very much alive in Canada, and she highlights how Montgomery, like fictional Anne, grew up in Prince Edward Island. But this is also because Montgomery encouraged these connections in her autobiography, The Alpine Path, such as how the Story Club in Anne of Green Gables was inspired by a little incident in school. Montgomery has always wanted to be a writer. She published her first poem on Cape La Force when she was 16, and 2 essays shortly thereafter. She published more than 500 short stories, 21 novels, and poems. Her work has been translated into multiple languages around the world. Anne of Green Gables has been translated into over 36 languages. But as I said, there is a tendency to forget that she was a real person with a complex life. As a minister's wife, she had to portray a certain persona for her community, which would be very different than Ella Montgomery, the writer, all the while being a mother and a wife too. I honestly don't know how she did it. It's important to remember that Montgomery was an internationally best-selling author, like a Margaret Atwood or a Jane Urquhart, who had often asked her opinion on books, who was often asked her opinion on books and writing for magazines and newspapers. Montgomery also helped start the Canadian Authors Association, but by the end of her life, her reputation she had cultivated as a leader in Canadian letters had been challenged by Canadian modernists and critics who didn't like the gray-haired provincial lady writers. As with many experience of many women writers of the time, Montgomery's work was belittled and relegated to the children's section. Anne of Green Gables and Montgomery's other novels were initially not published as girls' fiction or for children, but for everyone. And while there is nothing wrong with writing for children, because I do it too, by its nature, the field continues to have to fight to be recognized because it is still considered less than fiction for adult readers. So, let's quickly explore the origin story of this complex person. Montgomery was born in Clifton, now New London, Prince Edward Island, on the 30th November, 1874. Her parents were Hugh John Montgomery and Clara Woolner McNeil. When Montgomery was less than 2 years old, her mother died of tuberculosis, and the future author was sent to live with her mother's parents, Alexander McNeil and Lucy Woolner McNeil. Montgomery's father moved around a lot, eventually remarrying and settling in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Montgomery lived there for 1 year, but because, among other reasons, she fought with her stepmother, Montgomery returned to Cavendish. Later, Montgomery went to Prince of Wales College in Charlottetown, getting her teacher certificate and teaching for a few years around the island. She attended Dalhousie for 1 year and later wrote for the Halifax Daily Echo. But after her grandfather died, Montgomery returned to Cavendish to take care of her grandmother. In 1911, she married Presbyterian minister Ewan MacDonald, and the couple moved to Leaksdale, Ontario, and she had 3 sons, one whom unfortunately died when he was born. From 1926 to 1935, the family lived in Norval, Ontario. When Ewan retired, Montgomery bought a house in Toronto's West End, which you can still walk by and wave at, but it's a residence, so you can't go in, which she called Journey's End, where they lived till she died in 1942. Throughout her life, Montgomery suffered from undiagnosed mental health issues and had chronic physical health problems, which left her in a lot of pain. Her husband Ewan also faced mental health challenges. in the light of pharmaceutical and psychiatric treatment during the first half of the 20th century. And unfortunately becomes no surprise that Montgomery was prescribed barbiturates that she became reliant on. It is challenging for readers of her work to reconcile the author who wrote with humor and beauty with a person who died of a drug overdose. But to acknowledge her difficulties can help raise awareness of mental health today. Last year, in recognition of World Suicide Prevention Day, a bench was erected on the site of Lucy Maud Montgomery's Cavendish home. Located under the old apple tree that Montgomery wrote about in her journals, the bench is a way to remember those who have died by suicide and to offer a place of healing. The bench is inscribed with a quote from Anne of Green Gables, "Dear old world, you are lovely, and I'm glad to be alive in you." So as Montgomery engaged in artistic creation, we can see how artists, playwrights, actors, writers, musicians, and of course readers craft new pieces inspired by Montgomery's work around the world. Whether it's a bench to recognize suicide prevention, or a statue that commemorates Montgomery's love of beauty in a memorial garden. There's a stamp that came out this year from the Canadian Mint, or the upcoming mini-series that will explore Montgomery's life. These artistic creations highlight this complex author. In Two Annes, Many Annes, a writer's reflection of Anne of Green Gables and the Diary of a Young Girl, I wrote about how Anne of Green Gables and Ella Montgomery, I talk about how I found Anne of Green Gables and Ella Montgomery, I talk about how I first read Anne of Green Gables at 9, and I put it down because I had just read The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. And when I read the scene in which Marilla puts Anne in the small chamber, I somehow read the word chamber as gas chamber. While I realized this initial interpretation of Anne of Green Gables was incorrect, even now I still have the visceral memory of what my initial misreading felt like. And I have to remind myself that it is not what it says. So I put the book away and did not pick it up again until I saw the Kevin Sullivan television production in 1985. It was then that I discovered how, unlike Anne Frank, Anne Shirley survives to adulthood. Perhaps it was the pastoral landscapes, or that I watched it in the safety at home with my mother, or because I thought the actor who played Gilbert Blythe, Jonathan Crombie, was cute. But I knew I had a new appreciation of the story and returned to the novel. It was then I saw how Anne Shirley uses her imagination, not only as a coping mechanism, but as a way to inspire those around her and to make a life for herself. She receives a higher education, but also becomes a teacher, experiences the thrill of having a few of her stories and poems published, and eventually marries the man she loves. I no longer equate Anne Shirley with the Anne hiding in the attic. And Anne Shirley and Ella Montgomery are both also there when I need them. Later, I learned that Ella Montgomery had kept a journal her whole life, from the time she was 14. I have kept a journal my whole life since I was 12 and a half. You can see the one that's sort of wrapped in plastic. That's the first one. It's a gift from my grandmother. It's pale blue with a castle perched on the top of a cloudburst, and there's a rainbow leaping into the unknown. Well, I was also inspired by Anne Frank, discovering that Montgomery had also kept a journal from the time she was 14, also inspired me to continue to keep my own. So over time, my journal evolved from declarations of love for boys who are not worthy and dramatic stories of fair weather friends, and to what I hope are deeper explorations of my spiritual and emotional well-being. And yes, to rant to that invisible, non-judgmental audience. Montgomery's work have inspired me to delve deeper into historical fiction and writers' lives. It has inspired me to write. This is before Montgomery, but you can sort of see that I was writing around the time, yeah. And she certainly inspired me to keep writing. Over the years, my interest has shifted between Montgomery's writing process, her subversion of gender and romance, and her teen and college. This is the first essay I wrote, teen and college years. So my life and creative passions have been interconnected with Montgomery since I was probably around 9-ish, right? Just as I've played with Montgomery's work, I've also noticed how she engaged in artistic creation through scrapbooking and interacting with the books she has read, as I've mentioned. So one of Montgomery's favorite authors was Louisa May Alcott. Many scholars, including myself, have made comparisons between Little Women and Anne of Green Gables, such as when Jo March cuts her hair and Anne dyes her hair green. And when describing the book on her plain little bookcase, Montgomery notes how much she loved Alcott, having read and reread Little Women multiple times. In fact, this is a copy, this is a photo, this is like a picture I took of the photocopy of Montgomery's copy of Little Women, which you can go, this is what the public can see if you go to the Guelph Archives, because it's so badly damaged, okay? So when I was writing Maud, I thought of a lot about how I can incorporate these literary references. I thought hard about how I can use Little Women, and this is how I did it. So first thing I did was, at the beginning of the novel, I tried to show this strong link with Montgomery and the women writers who influenced her. And I used this quote from Alcott. "I want to do something splendid before I go into my castle, something heroic or wonderful that won't be forgotten until I'm dead. I don't know what, but I'm on the watch for it and mean to astonish you all someday. I think I shall write books and get rich and famous. That would suit me. So that is my favorite dream." Then I incorporated Little Women to not only show Maud's ambition and desire line, but to also connect it with the plot in her relationship with her first boyfriend, Nate Loker, looking particularly grumpy in this photo. As part of my ongoing conversation with Montgomery's work and crafting the character of Maud, I used both her literary conversation with Little Women and Montgomery's journal entries. So I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like. So this is early on in the book, and she's just writing in her journal. Similar to Jo March in Little Women, Maud imagined herself writing sweeping epics and articles for newspapers, or traveling to the great cities of the world, making something of herself. She would be independent, no longer relying upon her family, people such as her Uncle John Franklin, and having to worry about what they thought of her. Sometimes Maud would write about the weather, practicing the various ways one could describe the wind. Other times she confided certain feelings that she dared not share with anyone, feelings about being sent away, or how angry she got sometimes at her grandparents. They didn't understand that she needed to become independent, and that meant getting a good education. Unless you wanted to be in service, the only respectable option for young women was to teach. Maud, Grandma opened the old wooden door, wearing her starched gray dress and crisp white apron. Maud put her pencil down. "You were scribbling again, weren't you?" she sighed. "You're going to be late." "I was just finishing," Maud said. Grandma shut the door. Closing her journal, Maud stood up and straightened her new green dress, trying to ignore how small the bustle was. When Maud had returned from her Campbell cousin's home last week, Grandma had inspected Maud's old calico dress, which had almost reached her knees, and declared that was no way for a granddaughter of hers would be wearing a dress that looked like something you wore on dusting day. They had spent the last few days making clothes practical, meaning only a slight bustle, so no one could ever even detect. Hugging her journal to her chest, Maud walked over to the oak bedside table and safely tucked it underneath a pile of linens in the drawer, locking it shut. Her parents' photo sat on top. Mother was wearing a beautiful lace bodice, her light brown hair piled high in a luscious braid. Maud wondered what her mother had been thinking then. She would have understood Maud's desire for a dress with a grand bustle. She read over the note she had written that morning. "Dear Snip, I can only imagine the sort of trouble you mean, but I shall endeavor to stay out of it. Sincerely, Polly." As Maud placed it inside her copy of Little Women and put the book in her satchel, she had a daring idea. Maybe she would inspire Nate to read her favorite novel with her note. Surveying herself in the mirror one last time, she finished by putting on the gold ring Aunt Annie had given to her on her 12th birthday and went to join her grandmother in the kitchen. So what I hope you can see here is how I've incorporated some elements even from Anne of Green Gables and that desire for puff sleeves, but in this case it's a bustle. and just a few of the other elements that I was just talking about. Maybe you recall the picture of Clara Woolner McNeil and her mother with the hair. So also, while working on this keynote, let's the remote for a sec. Here we go. I remember that part of my creative process when writing Maud was to make Montgomery-inspired crafts. I am not an artist like the people here today. I should probably preface that. But one of these things were grounded in Montgomery's scrapbooks aesthetics. And I wrote a lot of the first draft of the novel by hand in a number of notepads. And one of these notepads, I went over to my friend Carolyn Nevin's house, and Carolyn is an artist and works in multiple mediums. And I bought some paper from the Paper Place on Queen West, which is this great store, and you should go check it out. And while she worked on her art, I crafted mine. And so with paper and glue, and I think she used some decoupage, she helped me make this book cover. And I did bring it today. So that's what I made. And while the back, it is frayed a little bit because I kept writing on it, right? But I think you can see that I try to see some of the similarities in color and design from the Victorian aesthetic I was trying to go for, right? Often, other ways I would visually imagine Montgomery while working on Maud was to make family trees and photos on my office. My entire office was full of this kind of stuff. I also had maps and photos on the wall to describe the setting. You can see that I also would take pictures. So some of the pictures were from the archives, but other times I would actually go to the places and get pictures there. This is an old one of Prince Albert that I would use. And then one of the volunteers of the Prince Albert Museum drew me this map because none of the places where Montgomery lived in Prince Albert are there anymore. So he drew me this map so I could know where things were. And part of the thing was that while Montgomery wrote about all these people, I had to still make them my own with my own ideas, right? So, three of the characters in particular, one we just saw was Nate Lockhart, and then the other two is Laura and Will Pritchard in Prince Albert. So Nate and Will, Laura is said to be, sorry, I'll just go back for a second. Laura is said to be the inspiration for Diana Barry. And then Will and Nate are said to be inspirations for Gilbert Blythe. So I spent a lot of time thinking about Gilbert Blythe, which for me is is just a good day for Melanie. So, for example, some of Gilbert's features, such as his crooked mouth, could possibly be lifted from Will, who Montgomery describes in her journal in 1890. He has red hair, green eyes, and a crooked mouth. So in my book, I use part of this inspiration for Will's character. Maud sees him right away on her first day in Prince Albert. But when he meets Maud for the first time, I write, now, how am I going to study with such beautiful brown hair in front of me? Maud froze, then Annie, that's her friend, giggled. Maud slowly turned around to see the red-haired boy from the Kennedy place, the one she had seen on her first day. He had, she admitted, the most charming green eyes and the most agreeable smile. Still, after the ridiculous behavior these boys were exhibiting, she wasn't about to allow him to get away with teasing her. It was dangerous to let boys get away with things. She was probably blushing. I guess you'll have to manage, Maud said, turning around. Now she was definitely blushing. My novel was therefore a creative response to Montgomery's letters, photos, her journal, and all the other ephemera she left behind. Lastly, I just wanted to leave with this most recent anecdote. I was asked to write a book review for a Yiddish studies journal called Angeweb on a newly translated novel called Dine, an autobiographical novel by Jewish Yiddish Canadian writer Ida Mazzei. She's actually Montgomery's contemporary. This coming-of-age novel is inspired by Mazzei's childhood in White Russia, now Belarus. Through the character of Dine, Mazzei mythologizes the lost shtetls of Kapil and Shluks. I'm probably totally mispronouncing these. I'm sorry. Showing a young girl's desire for education in a strict religious community. At the editor's suggestion, in this actually was literally published last Friday, so it's really new. I discussed these two women writers, Ida Massey and Ella Montgomery, who never met and probably did not know one another. But aspects of their work are none of the less similar. Both Massey and Montgomery explore how women in strict religious communities navigate social norms, promote women's education, and subvert romance. Both authors have protagonists whose gender is contentious, as Cuthbert's wish for a boy to help with the farm and they get a girl instead, and Massey's father wishes his daughter had been born a boy because she was so good at studying. Additionally, both authors have novels that feature a protagonist who is a conduit for other people's stories. Somehow, while reading Danae, I was reminded of Montgomery's later Anne novels, in which Anne is no longer the center of the story, but a witness to the people around her. Perhaps it's because I've read Montgomery's work for so long, I cannot help but see these comparisons. But these universalities, these connections with a writer from another culture and with human concerns generally, also show why Montgomery continues to be a source of inspiration, just as the exhibit is part of that ongoing conversation, one that I think will continue to connect us back to Montgomery and our work and forward to new and reimagined interpretations. Thank you.
Right. Andrea introduced me originally, and she said, yes, I am the coordinator for the Kindred Spirits exhibition. And indeed, she is correct about that. But my role here tonight is a little bit more. It is to express gratitude. As you can see, my slide just says thank you. I've only got the one slide because it's going to cover a lot of thank yous. So my role is to express gratitude to the many people and organizations that contributed to the evolution of the Kindred Spirits exhibition. And indeed, while I am the coordinator of the exhibit, it really has been much more personal than that. I am the person who conceived the idea and set out on this insane mission to see this through. It is, in essence, a love note and a love letter to Lucy Maud Montgomery. And of course, I didn't do this alone. It may have been my germ of the idea, but I had lots of folks helping me along the way. Firstly, I must say I have to thank the Government of Canada. They believed in this project when I first approached them about the potential of them financially supporting it, and indeed they did, and for that I am eternally grateful. Next, I want to thank Kate McDonald Butler. Some of you may not necessarily recognize the name, but Kate is the granddaughter of Lucy Maud Montgomery, and she is here with us tonight. If you want to just wave your hand, Kate, yay! And I was so pleased when I first approached her with this germ of an idea and said, this bookbinding guild that you may not have heard of, we have this idea about putting on this exhibit of works about Lucy Maud Montgomery. And she said, okay, that sounds like a good idea, and she blessed it, and we're very thankful and appreciated for that. And of course, it was all to honor Maud's 150th birthday. That was the inception for that. And I also must thank Kate for her willingness to be a juror or a judge for the exhibit. That was putting her a little bit outside her comfort zone to have her assess works of art, so to speak, but she was very willing to go along. And so in addition to Kate as a judge, I also had Don Taylor. So Don, if you want to raise your hand, he was one of our judges as well. And Liz Menard, who is back there, if you want to wave, she was also one of our judges for the exhibit. So I thank all three of you for your willingness to take on that challenging task. It's hard to believe that it was actually 1 year ago this week when we got together in my home and exchanged spirited banter while examining over 60 thought-provoking pieces submitted by Cabbage members. And they eventually whittled it down to the 37 works that you will see here this evening. And thank you all for agreeing to come out again this evening. I so appreciate your continued support for the Kindred Spirits exhibition. I also want to thank Cabbage book artists. Thanks to the many members of Cabbage who submitted works for this exhibit. We put out a call and said, you know what? You do you. however Maud speaks to you or has reached you through the years, you do something that encapsulates your love of her. So we had no idea what we were going to get, and we did get some absolutely wonderful things. So I thank them for supporting the Kindred Spirits exhibition and really for supporting the bookbinding community in general. Some of the artists whose works are in the exhibit are with us this evening. Emily Loker, who's going to be speaking to us in a few minutes. And I also understand I saw Margot Fagan's name on the guest list. I'm not familiar with Margot, and is she here this evening? Oh, she's there. She's hiding in the corner. I get to meet you later then. Okay, we've not met. Wonderful. Thank you. And of course, the judges were also invited to contribute something, and their works also travel with the showcase. So I do encourage everybody here this evening to seek out these folks, meet them, and learn more about their work, and their work not only in the exhibit, but also more about their craft. Many other Cabbage members also volunteered their time and their talent to bring Kindred Spirits to life, and I am grateful to all of them. Thank you also to the venues for your interest in the exhibit and for welcoming the public into your spaces. It's a lot of work to do this, but Kindred Spirits has been warmly received in every location to date, and this has made it all worthwhile. Thank you definitely to Massey College and to Andrea for bringing the exhibit to the University of Toronto community, and certainly for planning this evening's fantastic event. And lastly, I want to thank my husband. He drank the Kindred Spirits Kool-Aid, and he has been on board with this idea for 2 years now, and he has been cheerfully helping in every way imaginable. So he's here somewhere in the back. Thank you, Randy. So you want to thank you for that. Okay, so before I go and introduce the next speakers, I believe a little bit about Cabbage for your understanding of what this organization is all about. I'm going to be saying in a few minutes when I introduce Don, he was the founding member of Cabbage. It's now been in existence for over 40 years. As an organization, it is our mandate to be educators of the book craft. And it's not just book binding. It can be any of the adjacent crafts as well. So it can be book artistry, it can be fine binding, it can be box making, it can be calligraphy, it can be paste paper and paper decoration, it can be letterpress printing, because all of these disciplines surround this craft of bookbinding. And so the founding members believe very strongly that we should support this community and educate. So we have a very strong education component to our organization. When you do go upstairs, you'll see we have some postcards where you can pick up a postcard, go to our website, and just see all the wonderful things that we do. So in addition to educational workshops, we also invest in these nationwide traveling exhibits of bookworks. And so this is just one of the many things that we do. Okay, so now, Don, gird your loins. Here we go. Don is going to be our next speaker, and he was the founding member, as I said, of Cabbage over 40 years ago. He is a professional bookbinder and book artist in the GTA and creator of Pointy Head Press. And when I asked him to write a small bio for the Kindred Spirits website, the words I received were quintessential Don, and I know for those of you in the room, you do know him, and you're going to know why I say this. So I'm quoting Don here. I have taught book arts, subjects, and created design bindings and artist books since Caesar was a corporal. So we have invited Don to speak briefly about his involvement with the Kindred Spirits experience. So, Don, over to you. Oh, boy.
What's in Anne's bag? Yeah, that's what I called the piece, because I was intrigued. She, if you've read the book, you know that she arrives in Avonlea with clutching a rather messed up carpet bag, and with all of her worldly goods in it. She calls them her worldly goods, and which I was captivated immediately. I remember reading the book not really that long ago. I had ignored it as a girl's book for all those years, right? And then what a dummy I was, because I enjoyed it tremendously the first time, about 10 years ago. And then when Barb asked me to do this, to be a juror, I thought, oh, sure, that'd be fun, because it gives me a chance to reread the thing. So what I produced was Anne's carpet bag. I made this artist statement that to go with it, and I thought, well, I'll bring it along because it'll remind me of what I did. It was a year and a half ago. So what's in Anne's bag? We eventually learn about her 2 very skimpy night dresses, but after that we get to speculate. At least I got to speculate. Anne's carpet bag contains a few suggestions that reflect her aspirations and her vivid imagination. Photos of ladies in puff sleeves. Wait a second, I think I've got one. You've already seen them, but I love her. I have a customer, a very peculiar customer. I mean, I have lots of interesting customers because they're book people, right? You know, and this guy collects Victorian photograph albums, and so there's a surprising number of them out there that you can get at garage sales and so on, complete with photographs. And they're pretty intriguing because you never know who it is. Nobody ever wrote down it was Uncle George or whatever, right? But sure enough, out there, I maybe he gave me one time. I can't remember where I got it, but in there's this beautiful young woman with her puff sleeves, and I thought, well, I've got to use that. So, because Anne obsesses about puff sleeves, as we all know. Yeah, okay. There's a scrapbook, which you'll see eventually, that contains an illustration from a romantic novel by George MacDonald, the popular Victorian author of early fantasy and moral tales, and a clipping from a newspaper of aeronauts piloting a hot air balloon. If you recall, I think there was a hot air balloon at the county fair eventually in the book. Anne would love to go up in a balloon. There's a photograph of a young couple. Could they be the parents that she never knew, or people inhabiting a family like the one that she dreams of for herself? Somewhere she's picked up a page from from a Bible's family record. You know, in between the Testaments, between the Old and New Testaments, there's frequently births, marriages, and deaths. This one, it's a page that she's got from somewhere, but it is poignantly blank so far. And then my favorite slide is this lock of hair. And I thought the whole thing is about hair, you know, the whole book's about hair and hair awareness. And so I thought, okay, let's have a lock of hair. Where do I get one? And I thought, I didn't want to look too creepy, right? So I thought I could go to a hairdresser and, you know, poke around on it. And then I thought, and I said this to my absolutely invaluable assistant, Laura Rafferty, who has great hair. She has a tremendous amount of hair. I thought maybe she could spare some. So she said, well, I think I can help you out, actually. And I thought, well, yes, thank God. That's why I asked. Laura, during COVID, had got really bored, and she bleached her hair, her beautiful dark brown hair, and she bleached it and then tinted her hair green, just for fun. There is a slide of it somewhere on Instagram, and then when that was starting to fade out, she trimmed off some of her hair as it grew back in her natural color, and she kept it. So I was given a piece, this lock of her hair, didn't have to scour the floor of a, hair salon. Thank you. And so anyway, got this great piece of hair. I thought, thank you very much. It's fantastic. It is, however, green. And she said, well, yes, but it's fading, and it's really not, it's not good. It's going to be okay. Maybe you can dye it. And of course, we do dye things in bookbinding. You have to tint things, bits of leather and so on, to repair stuff. So of course I had some nice, I think it was mahogany, I believe it was called. So it's perhaps a little darker than Anne's red. Who knows how red her, although Gilbert calls her carrots, right? Doesn't he? Anyway, so it's not carroty red, but it did turn out nice. I was assisted in this task by Jay Hughes back there, who I can see lurking in the audience. She won't identify herself, but she did help me out with the tying of the lock so that it looked authentic. And so that was my favorite part of making the scrapbook. But in addition to that, a lock of hair, perhaps her mother's, that has been saved for her by a guardian, and then a scrap of silk for aspirational puff-sleeve dresses, pictures of flowers, bits of pretty paper patterned with apple and plum blossoms, and that was the place to go for apple and plum blossoms is the Japanese paper place. They have lots, and ribbons for her much-hated red hair. And they're all preserved in her scrapbook of hopes and dreams. There's a tiny book of prayers. I think maybe I'll flip to the next and final slide. So you can see it all now. The scrapbook, the little tiny prayer book, which I had lying around for years. I picked it up in a junk store, thought it was in distressed condition. And it's about 3 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide, or 2 inches wide. You can see it in the bottom of the slide there. So I thought, well, I'll put a little green leather because of the green and red, and so I thought, all right, I'll do that. And then I found, and also in my collection of random stuff that I've got lying around the studio, and who knows where I got this, which doesn't matter, but I did bind the tiny book of prayers. We can all remember those of us who have read the book, that how shocked Marilla is when she tells Anne to say her prayers, and Anne delivers a quite inappropriate confection of her own. And finally in the bag is a guide to the pronunciation of 7,000 words often mispronounced. I thought, that's so Anne. I mean, that's crazy. We've got to have that. So anyway, my conclusion is that who knows where kids pick these things up. Anne of Green Gables is a tough little survivor, and as her carpet bag reveals, she has chosen her treasures carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And you can see that carpet bag, and it's in the case that's in the vestibule past the double doors. So admire those works, so thank you. And next up, Emily Loker. Emily is a Cabbage member and has been working with the Library of Parliament since 2018, where she is currently a senior binder. 2 of her works were selected to be part of the Kindred Spirits exhibition, and we've invited her to speak about those. So welcome, Emily.
When I first heard about the call for submissions to this exhibition, I was extremely excited to participate. Ella Montgomery has always been one of my favorite authors, and whether I read them first as a child or continued to reread them as an adult, I always find something new to engage with because there's just such a wealth of experience and just amazing insight involved in all of them. The first book that I bound for this project was The Story Girl. It is a beautiful celebration of the power of words and stories, particularly when we share them with those who matter to us. I found it interesting that in 1917, Ella Montgomery actually wrote that it was the favorite of her novels that she had written at that point in time. So that really speaks to the importance of story in everything that she did. In particular, it shows again and again the joy and the power of a shared love of reading, story, and imagination, but particularly between a child and a parent or an older role model. This was a very familiar theme in my own childhood, as I have many fond memories of Ella Montgomery's books playing an important part in that. And now I figure out if I can use this. Yes. For this binding, I decided to go with a full goatskin leather with embossing and tooling in blue and copper. There are hand-sewn silk headbands. The end papers are handmade acrylic marbling, and around the edge there is calligraphy and sprinkling with ink and further acrylic paints. The embossed figures of a mother and child are reading together in the center of the front cover. There are quotes that spiral around them, right across the front, onto the back, and then inwards. They were deliberately made subtle, so I chose a foil that was just a slight shade different in color than the leather itself so that they wouldn't be too obvious, but they're still there. They create a different kind of texture and an overall background that actually helps to define these two figures and their relationship to each other. So all of the quotes were chosen from the book, and they have to do with the power of voice, imagination, and particularly the well-chosen word or phrase. One quote that I found particularly beautiful and meaningful actually wraps all the way around the foredge, enclosing the text of the book. The quote is, "Nothing is ever truly lost to us as long as we remember it." As long as it's mostly hidden by the sprinkling. You can see in looking at it here or in looking in the picture. It's barely visible, but if you look hard enough, it is still there and you can still read it. Not only does this quote really speak to the themes of the book itself, I find that it also speaks to my personal ethos as a bookbinder. Books and shared stories are our society's way of remembering, and when we create beautiful and enduring bindings for them, we're helping to keep those memories and stories from becoming lost. This is also true of the craft and skills of bookbinding and the book arts themselves. There's inherent value in preserving those knowledge and skills, and this is importantly done by sharing it widely, which also felt like a nice little homage to Cabbage and its goal of sharing and teaching as widely as possible. So that was my first book. The second book that I did was Emily of New Moon. This was actually one of the first of Ella Montgomery's books that was given to me by my grandparents, and I've always particularly enjoyed and felt a personal connection with her stories, and not only because we shared a first name. I've always been just struck by her incredible resilience, arguably even more so than Anne. This character lives through some extremely difficult and even downright tragic circumstances, but she always and deliberately maintains a sense of joy and wonder and a fierce dedication to finding ways to share the beauty that she finds in the world with the people that she cares about. Again, this is a full leather binding, in this case with sculpted boards. I did leather mosaic in inlay and onlay techniques. It's printed in silver, again with hand-sewn silk headbands, handmade acrylic marbled end papers, and in this case a hidden foredge painting. One recurring image throughout the book is Emily's idea of a curtain or a veil that can, with effort, be pulled aside to reveal incredible beauty and a deep connection to the world, even in the darkest of circumstances. So I tried to show this curtain being pulled back to reveal sort of a scene of brightness and growth that might otherwise have remained hidden, going from a dark, maybe a little bit forbidding sort of night forest underneath the tiny little new moon up here, to show a bed of ferns with the stars in the night sky being reflected in this flurry of fireflies amongst the plants. The bas-relief sculpting of the boards gives a little bit of an extra sense of the weight and depth of this curtain, which is caught and held back by the combined names of the title character and the author, which again just felt like an appropriate them helping us to see this additional bit of beauty. Throughout the Emily books, optimism is shown as a deliberate choice. It's not always easy, but a dedicated attention to the small things and approaching life with curiosity, creativity, and a constant willingness to learn is often really strongly rewarded. This curiosity and willingness to learn in my own binding practice has led me to experiment with what was once a much more common technique, now is a far less so, technique of the hidden foredge painting. So it felt appropriate that this would also be a way to reward the attention to detail and curiosity of somebody who was engaging with the book, because from most angles, it looks like a solid silver edge. There's not a whole lot to see. From certain angles, you can see a hint of something more, but further exploration reveals something just a little bit further. And it just felt like a nice coming together of sort of my curiosity and the curiosity of the reader or the viewer, just to bring it all together. Preparing these books and being able to participate in this exhibition and celebrate my love of and respect for the works of Ella Montgomery has been a wonderful experience and a lot of fun, and I am very pleased to have been able to share my work with you tonight.
Thank you, Emily. And if you want to see those books up close, they were in the case that's down the hallway where you likely came down the stairs from the front street, so that's where you'll be able to see them located. So I am wrapping up the evening and saying thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming out and sharing this important moment celebrating Lucy Maud Montgomery. I do appreciate everybody coming. I do invite you to go to the Kindred Spirits website. You can find that at www.kindred-spirits-bookarts.com, where you can learn more about the exhibit and also see all of the pieces in closer detail, so if you're interested in that. And otherwise, that concludes the speeches. You are welcome to take a look at the exhibits that are in the cases, as Andrea indicated, around this room. And then we do welcome you upstairs, where we do have some coffee, some crackers and cheese, and also the opportunity to buy Melanie's book. And there is some Kindred Spirit merchandise as well. So thank you again very much.